What has the transition been like, going from the world of politics, and that was a few years ago, to what you're doing now, interacting with governments on behalf of and with OpenAI?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I was in government, I was interested in the way government interacted with the private sector, and in this job, it's the private sector interacting with government, and it's just unbelievably interesting. You're approaching quite similar issues about how societies function and how they advance and how you deliver benefits to people, just from a different angle, from the angle of a frontier AI lab rather than number 11 Downing Street.
I wonder if tech and AI can be more effective at delivering solutions than maybe government can.
Well, I think governments should be harnessing tech and AI solutions to do what they're supposed to do, which is improve the lives of their citizenry and protect those citizens. And I mean, that's very much what my job at OpenAI is. I've been doing it for around 6 months now, which is engaging with countries and helping them adopt AI in a way that is not just safe, but productive for them and in a way that's comfortable for them.
What is top of mind for governments when you interact with them and you talk to them about the solutions that OpenAI can provide with all of those caveats?
I mean, the truth is all governments are somewhat different, and all countries are a little bit different. So it varies. You know, Malta, we just concluded a deal where every Maltese citizen who completes an online AI course gets, our more advanced form of ChatGPT Plus. In Singapore, we're, just concluded an agreement with the Singapore government to make that a kind of center in Asia of forward deployed engineering. So you have these conversations all over the world, and they're all slightly different. But I would say what is similar is two things. One is most governments have a sense of FOMO. We want AI adopted. Obviously, there are issues which we can probably come on and discuss about how you adopt it and the consequences of adopting it. But I think most governments, most countries know they need it and they want it harnessed to the best possible use. And at the same time, obviously, there are very legitimate policy questions about how AI is going to change the world, what control individual countries have over that technology. So although each country is different and the conversations I have with the various governments are different, there are similarities, and I'm not surprised coming from that world that those are the questions.
We're not yet seeing, given the cost, we're not yet seeing the productivity gains, the material sustained productivity gains that maybe some had expected to see. Do you face pushback on that from governments? Are they concerned about the cost of adopting and not yet seeing real productivity gains across their economies?
I'm not sure that's completely true. I mean, first of all, more broadly in the US economy, not in the European economies. We're here in a nice warm day in Oxfordshire. But in the US economy, you are seeing an uptick in productivity, which may well be linked to AI. It's early days, but after a long and static period for productivity growth, it's looking like it's picking up in the US. And I think you are beginning to see early signs that early adopters of AI are getting productivity gains. I'll give you one example. Greece, in the European Union, has worked with us to bring AI into its schools. That's quite a challenge if you think of Greece, rural schools, islands, and working with teaching unions and the like. But they've done it, driven by an impressive prime minister there. And they are beginning to see results in Greek schools that are better than they would otherwise have been. And around the world, institutions like Harvard have started to notice that. So I think you are seeing, what is true is that many governments haven't yet really delivered on the adoption. They've talked about it, they've got ambitions around it, but they're still in the process of delivering. Now, I know, I've been in government, things take a while, but the governments, I think, that do adopt more quickly will be the big winners. They'll be the winners in their national economy, winners in the quality of their public services, and winners potentially in where their country is going to be over the next century.
Is the UK adopting quickly enough?
Well, I would say the UK, they've got a great ambition. I've been actually at quite a lot of events this week with the person now doing my job, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and with the very impressive AI Minister here, Kanishka. And they've got absolutely the right ambition, which is to be the fastest adopting nation in the G7. I think the big question now is delivery and getting that into the public services, into making the public service reforms that are required to make the most use of this general purpose technology. So, as often in government, the question is delivery, but the ambition is there.
Do you think a ban on social media for under 16s would be an appropriate step as we weigh up some of the risks of, more broadly, of technology?
Well, it's not an issue directly for OpenAI. It's more for the social media companies and the government. And I'm not a legislator. I mean, I think the most important thing is that the technology companies, including OpenAI, provide the technology that enables policymakers to make those decisions, and that means proper age verification. Strong age verification, so that you know what age the user of the technology is. And in the case of ChatGPT, we put people onto, unless they can prove they're an adult, they go on to the youth version, which has more guardrails and legitimate protections. So, I think that's where having been a legislator, it's not for the companies to decide the laws of the land, but it is for the companies where they can to enable as many options for lawmakers.
Yeah, there is concern, isn't there, that the toxicity that has been associated with some social media platforms could be turbocharged, or is being turbocharged by AI, and that's part of the debate.
Yeah, I think there's a distinction. I don't think many people would doubt that there are a lot of opportunities and upsides to AI. There's more of a debate around social media. With open, you wouldn't want your students not to have access to this technology in the future. Otherwise, you really would be, pricing your country out of the future. Particularly when lots of other countries are bringing AI into their schools, into their universities. The question is how it's done. Are you doing it with teachers? Does the technology enable students to still think for themselves as they come up with answers? But you wouldn't want them to be cut off from AI. I think that would be quite a dangerous step for a country.
And you touched on the balance that governments have to make between the risks and the opportunities. Dario Amodi, of course, of Anthropic, has said that ultimately governments should be allowed to step in, should have the power to block the release of models if they don't meet certain safety requirements. Do you align with that? Is that a sensible approach? Is that the approach that should now be being taken, given how fast frontier models are progressing?
Well, first of all, OpenAI has been seeking to lead the policy debate. We've published lots of interesting papers in the last 6 months around industrial policy, safety, international coordination, international regulation. And Sam Altman will be at the G7, which is happening in the next week. And we worked with the Trump administration, as the other frontier labs did, on the latest executive order. I take a view that that's their parish, that ultimately it's for governments, democratic governments, lawmakers to make decisions, and it's for companies to comply with those decisions.
You're well placed to weigh in on this, though, given your background. That ultimately, if a model is considered too dangerous, a government should have the power to be able to intervene.
I can tell you, if OpenAI considered a model too dangerous, then it wouldn't release it. We have very strong internal safety checks and requirements on that, and we're very happy to and willing to comply with the latest.
But we don't
executive
apply that
order.
model to the airline sector or to the car sector.
Well, I don't think that's actually entirely true. I think products are developed, and the initial checks happen within the companies. Airline companies don't want to produce airlines that don't apply.
But there are very strict regulatory requirements. You can't release a car on the market if it doesn't meet the regulatory requirements.
And we comply. You can't release a model that doesn't comply with the laws of the land. So we comply with the laws of the land. And look, I think what you're right to say is that legislation in this space across the world is going to develop over the coming years. The one thing I would say is you have to be careful, having been a legislator, not to produce static laws that don't deal with rapidly changing technology. So the laws have to, the regulatory bodies that will no doubt be created, need to be flexible and able to keep pace with what is a remarkably fast-changing technology environment. Even in the 6 months I've been at OpenAI, you can just see the pace of the technology changing.
Yeah. Final question, Chancellor. Former Chancellor. Final question, George. Final question, George.
It was 10 years ago.
Final question, George. With your former experience as Chancellor, you obviously dealt with numbers. You dealt with large sums of money. Now you're in an environment, an ecosystem that has involved huge amounts of money, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, trillion-dollar market caps and valuations. How different is it in terms of the pools of capital that you're dealing with, the sheer amount of money that's going into this ecosystem?
Yeah.
having formerly worked in the public
Well,
sector?
I always thought it was a mistake when you were in government to think that it's just sort of taxpayer dollars, as they would say, or taxpayer pounds here in Britain that count. You know, what works, what's effective is when you harness the private sector to deliver economic growth. You bring private capital in, and you know, if you create an environment which, to be fair, Founders Forum here in Oxfordshire reflects, where people are investing in the UK or the European ecosystem, that's vastly more powerful than any funds that the Treasury can announce. A Treasury fund can kind of catalyse things. I'll take one example, which you know we didn't so much touch upon, but you know, if you look at cyber security, you could spend any amount of money in government on developing cyber tools, but it's actually, you know, OpenAI's 5.5 cyber model, which, you know, gives government enormous assurance that it can patch holes, protect its systems, protect vital national infrastructure, developed with private capital, not developed inside the Defence Department or wherever it happens to be.
And you're seeing that demand from governments for
And
those
very
tools?
much so, and I'm very much involved in letting governments have access to that model, working with governments so that they patch their systems before, you know, bad actors get hold of it. And you know, our approach at OpenAI has not been to sort of hold back and say, you know, we will decide, but rather to work with democratic governments across the EU, countries like Canada, Australia, Korea, Japan, obviously the US, in making sure that the good guys stay ahead.